Bonjour à tous. Je vous parlais d'action, mais d'abord, je vous parlais des post-it notes. Et maintenant en anglais. I love post-it notes. So I love post-it notes so much that I own stock in 3M just because of the post-it note. And it turns out that post-it notes have a lot of different uses if you're creative about it. So you can have just a post-it note for kind of your day-to-day use, but you can use post-it notes to decorate an office. You can use post-it notes on a very sunny Parisian day. You can use post-it notes for a really kickin' winter is coming Game of Thrones party, although winter has now come and gone. You can use post-it notes to teach someone a lesson who parked in a space that he should not have parked in. And it turns out if you're really low on cash, you can even use post-it notes for sustenance, although I wouldn't necessarily advise it. A few years ago, I was at South by Southwest, which is the big international film, music, different types of things festival in Austin, Texas, and Tunisia. And I was so excited because 3M was there and they were giving out free post-it notes. But they weren't just giving out the little post-it notes, they were giving out these big post-it notes, these ones that are like bigger than the size of a human head. And so I was like, all right, I gotta get some of these. And so I got a lot of them. And so I'm with a friend of mine and we're carrying these post-it notes and deciding what are we gonna do with these. And during the South by Southwest Festival, if any of you have ever seen photos or been there or that kind of thing, it is like the FOMO capital of the world, right? The fear of missing out. There's 8 billion different things happening at any given time. And so we decided to sit down at this bar and just think, what are we going to do with these post-it notes? And I just decided to write on one of them, free problem solving, #0problems, and kind of stick the note out onto the street. And as people are walking by, we're like, hey, free problem solving. If you have problems in life, business, horseback riding, welding, like you name it, we'll solve your problem. And this is like our little free problem solving stand. And at first it starts out not very serious. People are like, does my shirt fit? Or how do you think about this? But then this woman in the pink, she's like, can I solve problems with you? And we're like, sure. So then she's solving problems with us. All these people start tweeting about the whole experience that's happening. We have a line that's 2 blocks down of people waiting to have their problem solved. There's an intern who's collecting pizza for people in line, all this kind of stuff. And then I'll never forget a woman from Goodwill, which is a large chain of consignment stores in the US. They have like 500 stores. She's like, how can we grow our brand? I'm like, how can you not grow your brand? You have like 500 stores. At one store, triple your prices, see what happens. At one store, offer gift wrapping services. At one store, have a co-working space, like all these different stuff. She's like, oh my God, can you help me come up with more ideas? And I'm like, I just gave you 20 ideas. Go do those, and then we can talk about more. But what that whole experience cemented for me is that people value collecting ideas more than actually making them happen. We all want to have the best idea collections of things we could do someday instead of taking the time to take action and make the things happen that we really want to make happen now. And so I started to try to understand, why is that? What are the things that we know to be true about action? What are the things that really hold people back from acting? And what are the things that spark people to act? And that led me on this whole journey of studying action. And I want to set up a couple principles that we know to be true about action that I think will help inform the rest of our time together over the next couple days as we think about wanting to make sure that we're really action-oriented and that this isn't just a conversation about the key issues that Laura set up, but that we're really set up to take this back into our organizations and actually make an impact and actually take the outcomes. I used to spend a lot of time in rooms like this. Who's ever been in a session with the post-it notes flying, right? Design thinking type stuff, which is great. One of the biggest challenges with these types of sessions is a week later when you're like, what the heck ever happened to all those post-it notes, right? Because we really struggle with making that happen. Events is another big place where action problems tend to be present. You have all these new ideas, all this potential energy and potential momentum, and then you get back home and it's sucked back into the emails and the phone calls and all the latest challenges, and it's hard to take action. So I want to set up just 3 key things for us to think about how we think about action, which is based in a lot of the research with neuroscientists, psychologists, sociologists, as Michelle talked about. So in most of the work, what we found is that the people who are most successful at taking action take a surge of action on things. What do I mean by that? I mean, most of the time when we have an idea, we either don't make any progress on it, or we'll slowly make a little bit of progress over time, right? Let's set up a meeting once a week, kick the can down the road, make a little bit of progress. But the people who get the most done take a surge of action on things right away. They're able to create that momentum, create that snowball effect where they get a lot of stuff done. And there are three things that really help set up a surge. One is this idea that action is a muscle. Okay, so just like some people exercise their biceps, right, like not me, but some people. So action is something that you can work to exercise as well. And it comes with asking that question of what action might I take in any given situation? And so I'll share with you a story of a woman who has a really well-defined set of action muscles. And this is a woman named Nina Muffla. So Nina decided a couple years ago she wanted to finally go get her dream job. And her dream job was to work for Airbnb. And so she did the things that you typically do when you're in the job hunt process. She made sure her resume was all great. She looked, who do I know on LinkedIn? Who can I connect with? All the kind of stuff. Didn't get any opportunity, didn't get any interviews, didn't get any job. And most people kind of feel like, oh, I've exhausted what I can do. But as someone who's always thinking, what actions might I take? She thought, well, what would I do if I got the job for Airbnb? And Nina is actually an expert in Turkey. And so she was like, well, I would want to help them expand in Istanbul and Ankara and Cappadocia and kind of the whole thing. And so she created this website, ninaforairbnb.com, with a detailed white paper for how Airbnb could expand in those markets. She tweeted it to Brian Chesky, the CEO of Airbnb, who said, hey, this looks great, let's chat. From that, not only did she end up getting a job offer for her dream job, she got 7 other job offers as well and ended up taking one of them that was even better than her dream job. But so often we always think, oh, it's out, I've done everything that I can do. Part of developing that action muscle is there are always actions that you can take to make some progress on something. Oftentimes when we think about that on a very tactical day-to-day basis for ourselves, we think about that as maybe to-do lists or writing stuff down. It's interesting, we studied to-do lists. Only 29% of the time that we write something down that we want to do we actually do it? 39% of the time if we write down why. But if we're really specific where and when, the more specific we get, the more likely we are to make things happen. So one of the really important things about this is getting just really specific and clear. Not write a business plan for X, because ooh, that sounds hard. But Google business plan, read the first 10 articles, pick a template, fill out the first section of the template, do the things that are really specific to get it done. Okay, so that's that first thing, action is a muscle. Second thing we know is that we have a bias as humans towards wanting to set aside time later, particularly for the things that are most important to us. When we see that this is a really big opportunity in my life, in my business, whatever it is, we want to make sure we do it right. We want to make sure we realize the best possible outcomes. So we wait for the perfect day with nothing else on the calendar, when the sun is shining, when it's like the perfect situation where I just need that perfect day to bang it out. But what happens, right? That perfect day does not exist. There's no such thing as a day with nothing else on the calendar. The latest customer complaint, the latest challenge, the latest talent issue, whatever it is. And so a week passes, a month passes, a year passes, and that time doesn't come. It's really important to think, what can I do right now to make some progress on something? And so I'll tell you a quick story about that, which starts with pool floats. So anybody have a pool at home or somewhere that you go that has any of these pool floats? They're tremendously popular. They become really popular on Instagram of late. Everyone wants to have the cool pool float. And so the guy's at a party, he sees this pool float, and he says, you know what would be cool is a pink flamingo version of this. But at the time, it didn't exist. And most people you have an idea like that, you just kind of leave it there. But he's like, you know what? I'm sitting here at a pool party. I have 5 minutes. So he gets out his phone, Google's China manufacturer, gets on the phone with somebody hey, China, I want to make this pink flamingo pool float, designs it over the phone with somebody in 5 minutes. 6 weeks later, this pink flamingo pool float shows up at his house. He has a pool party. Everybody falls in love with the thing, and he's since started his pink flamingo pool float company and makes 6 figures a year selling these pink flamingo pool floats because he took the 5 minutes to take some action on it right now instead of putting it aside for later. The third thing we know to be true about action is that it's easier to generate actions for other people's ideas than it is our own. And this sounds simple, but it's actually quite profound in the way it manifests itself. So often when we have an idea and we're trying to think, what can I do? It's really hard. We have a lot of baggage of what we've tried before. We have the proximity bias of knowing too much about it. When someone else comes to us with an idea, it's easy to fire off actions for that person, right? We love generating actions we don't have to take. And so it's really important to make sure that we're thinking about the collaborative aspect of action when we really want to make something happen. And actually, I'll share a story. I know that some of those stories are kind of simple stories. I like to call those first two stories art gallery stories, where, like, you ever walk into a modern art gallery and think, well, I could have done that. It's like, yeah, but you didn't, right? Somebody else did. And so that's kind of the point. But I want to share one from a corporate example, because I know that we have a large corporate audience here as well. So when I was working at J&J, at Johnson & Johnson, I was working with this woman named Magda, who was incredible. She was very passionate, really sharp scientist. And she was working on the delivery of an antidepressant drug. But she was more passionate about actually addressing depression systematically and how we diagnose depression. Because how we diagnose depression hasn't changed in many years, and there's better ways to do it. And so she actually had an idea that through video game play, we could actually make a better diagnosis. Instead of kind of based on self-report of a clinician sitting with the patient, someone actually making decisions in gameplay, that it would be better. Now imagine the meeting where Magda goes to some leader at J&J and says, I want to make a video game. We're a drug company, medical device company, consumer health product company, video game. And so she had a lot of resistance, and she was just kind of let it die. But going through a process we call action storming, which is something you're going to have the opportunity to experience tomorrow, people helped her generate, what are actions you might take to progress this? Let's get something simple that we can go to a clinical trial. Let's put together some very, very simple things. And based on taking some simple actions, she was able to actually get data to support that, yes, this hypothesis was correct. We actually could help patients. And J&J has since launched a game, if you can imagine, a video game in the marketplace that is helping with the diagnosis of depression in a totally new way. And so it's really important that we don't let our fears around action and our bias towards wanting to set aside time later and all these things stop us from taking action. And that's what this event is about. That's what this experience is about. Everything in life that's hard is just a series of things that are easy, but we have to break it down. And while we're at this Boma Campfire experience, that's that opportunity to challenge each other, to support each other, to make sure that we're really working to take action. So thank you very much. Merci beaucoup. I wish you well on your journeys for taking action while we're here together.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Steve. Oui, on aura l'occasion demain de tester la méthode que Steve a développée qui s'appelle Surge. Est-ce que vous avez une question pour Steve? Je prends ma catchbox. Petite question pour Steve.
Thank you. You said that you liked post-it notes. What do you think about Trello?
About?
Trello, the digital post-it notes. That's a software solution online.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of different cool collaborative tools that are also environmentally sustainable, that kind of stuff. I'm less now into writing something down to do later, and more about how do I either do it right now in the time it took to write it down, or automate it and get it done. So I have almost banished that kind of stuff from my life, because instead of writing something to do later, just now. But yeah, there's different purposes.
Okay.
Une autre question? Non? Pas de question pour Steve? Oh. I have a question for you. I didn't hear anything about the science behind the methodology. Can you tell us a little bit more about this?
Yeah, so this is kind of the high-level view. If we think about the first concept on the muscle, for example, in neuroscience, there's been a lot of really profound advancements in the last few years in this idea of neuroplasticity. So basically, some of you may have heard this idea that neurons that fire together wire together, right? We essentially form habits. Our brain forms these pathways, which is why maybe as you were driving here, you kind of zoned out and you didn't crash, because certain habits get hardened. And the thing is that you can actually change those habits. So if your habit is you have an idea and you want to wait, you have to work towards it, but you can change those habits. You can actually rewire your brain to become more action-oriented, whatever it is. Or when it comes to things like procrastination, oftentimes we tell ourselves, oh, I need to let this slow burn. I'm going to come back to it later. That's actually your brain telling you that you need to come back to this when you're in the right state. because we spend all of our time either in this comfort zone, like the Netflix zone of like, kind of engaged.
I love this
something.
Netflix zone.
Yeah, the Netflix zone. It's also like the corporate meeting zone. You're there, but you're not really there, right? Then there's the learning zone, which is the action zone. We want to expand our amount of time in that zone. That's when you can feel you're really in something. You're solving a problem. You're working through something. Then, of course, the really elevated level is the panic zone, which can lead to kind of anxiety and chronic stress. And like, you need to spend time in all three, but you want to spend as much time in that action zone. And so oftentimes when you find yourself like, oh, I need to come back to this later, it's like, I need to come back to this when I'm in the right zone. And part of that is managing my energy better and, doing that kind of stuff. So, I mean, there's obviously a lot of things behind this, but.
And how much time we use this action zone in usually? Do you have any statistics about this?
Yeah, it depends, and it's something that you can work to grow. Like maybe the average person is spending about half of the amount of time in that zone that they could be spending in, and so there's a lot of opportunity to expand that. If you think about when your energy is best, when you're in that zone. When you're working through something. Some people are like, oh, I know I'm a morning person or evening person. How are you leaning into your best time? When you get up in the morning, if you're a morning person, are you answering email or are you working through a tough challenge? Right? It's a lot of it is about just being really intentional about managing our days.
Thank you.
Hello. Yeah. Sorry. So quick, fantastic explanation. Just one question. It seemed the way you explain it as much as a very individual type of approach. Do you have any ideas on how you run some collective movements, small teams? How do you change your formula or not? And what would be, say, the actual size of a small team that would go on to that search as you defined it?
Yeah, so in organizations we call this action literacy, which is how action literate is the organization. And every organization or team exists somewhere on a sliding scale of action inertia, of like, oh, it's really hard to get stuff done, to action chaos, of everybody's out taking action on a bunch of different things and it's not aligned. And so it's really important to have, the intent of kind of what do we want, and then work to kind of go from there. Most of the time, what I find, particularly the larger the organization, the more it's the inertia, and the more that it's about how do we make sure we're giving permission. I have permission granted stamps when I work with people. Like, people need 10 times more permission than you think they do to take action on something. So it's like, hey, you don't need permission from me, but permission granted, like, go make it happen, and make examples of those kinds of things to help people work to take action. So I think a lot of it's about stating the intent, and then as leaders in the seats we sit in this room, it's also about role modeling. Because if we are not personally action-oriented, if people don't see us taking action on things, then of course they're not going to think that that's something that's an imperative. So that's a big part of it too.
Any other question? Une autre question, peut-être? No? Okay.
I have one question for the group.
Yeah.
This is, like, my understanding, the most important question in all of France right now is, qu'est-ce que vous dites? Pain au chocolat or chocolatine? So I'll be asking you your answers over the course of the experience.
Thank you, Steve.
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Steve.